Rainworld is a game that I wasn't mentally prepared for. When I first booted it up, I was hoping for an emotional journey, something I could lose myself in, something slow and immersive. What I got was far more profound, a memory that lingered. There's this metaphor I found while reading about Rainworld's development, a way the developers described how they built the game. A rat in Manhattan. Not a lab rat in a maze, not the chosen one, just a creature, living in a space too vast and complex to ever truly understand. The rat knows that the train is dangerous. The tunnel is safe. Old dusty potato chips are edible, sometimes even delicious. The rat doesn't know what a subway is. It doesn't need to. It just knows how to survive. And that's what Rainworld feels like. You aren't given a quest log or even an objective. You're simply dropped into a world that's already spinning and told, good luck. For the first few hours, it didn't feel like a typical game. I felt like I was merely existing in a world that didn't care if I lived or died. Didn't care whether I was even there to witness its chaos. Some creatures noticed me. Others slinked by. Sometimes the rain came and washed everything away. And no matter how far I got, I always felt like I was missing something. Not a mechanic or a shortcut, but understanding. Eventually I realized understanding wasn't the point. You're not meant to conquer this world. You're just meant to survive in it. What began as survival slowly became something else. Quieter, heavier, and harder to walk away from. Somewhere between drowning in a tunnel or being dragged off by a lizard, I realized what Rainworld was really about. I stopped trying to win, and I started surviving. Man, I've seen this cutscene more than a dozen times, and it still gets me. Rainworld opens with a quiet heartbreak, and then drops us into the body of Slugcat. At first, it plays like a minimalist platformer. Slugcat is nimble, the controls are smooth, intuitive. But Rainworld's not about just going from A to B. It's not really even a platformer. It's an ecosystem. The game isn't teaching you how to play. It's teaching you how to survive. You need to feed yourself, learn the routes, slowly piece together the things it refuses to explain. Rain is coming. Find shelter soon. At first, it means nothing, and then the screen rumbles. The platformer costume tears away. Water rises. The sound muffles. And then, nothing. Rainworld runs on cycles. Each day ends the same way. Eat enough to hibernate. Find shelter. Try not to drown. That's the loop. But the game never says this out loud. It waits, watching, until you adapt, until you evolve. After those first few screens, the tutorial ends, and I'm left to just survive. The first lizard I saw wasn't trying to kill me. It was fighting with another, minding its own business, just existing. These aren't enemies. They're just like me, trying to survive. And once I saw that, the whole experience shifted. I watched how creatures moved. I learned that lizards could chase you through tunnels, but they couldn't climb poles. So I found one. Climbed just high enough. And for the first time, I wasn't running. I was adapting. Rainworld gives you that freedom, but it also applies just enough pressure to keep you scared. Every decision matters. I stumbled into an area rife with birds. Twitchy, harmless creatures. The level was built for it. Vertical layers, clever routes for ambush. It felt like I'd found a place to thrive. But then I learned one of Rainworld's most important lessons. I was trying to hook a bird for dinner, but I never stopped scanning the edges of the screen, because if I was hunting, something else might be too. Eventually I realized, those spiky wall sprites weren't traps. They were nests, and that changed everything. I knew where the food would be, and what danger came with it. That's Rainwild's idea of progression. You don't get stronger, you get smarter. Understanding becomes your upgrade. Because the world runs on cycles, nothing stays in place. Creatures wander, but you never feel safe, and you never know what's waiting. You don't memorize Rainwild, you just live in it. The early stages are like this, confusing, overwhelming, a little nerve-wracking. But after a few hours I noticed something strange. Maybe it had been there all along. A small, orange figure, holographic, flickering. The Orange Overseer. It never spoke, never explained anything, but it felt cozy. It nudged me forward, towards tunnels, food, shelter. And in a world so determined to say nothing, that tiny flicker of direction started to matter. It wasn't a teacher, it felt more like a ghost, of someone who made it further than I had. So I followed it. Through the rain, through the repetition of dying, over and over again. And then Rainwild gave me something. A memory. A dream. A quiet flash of the beginning. And that's when it hit me. I didn't want to just survive. I wanted him to survive. I wanted to get him home. After hours of wandering, after the frustration buried the emotion of the first cutscene, this was the moment the game got its hooks into me. That was the spark. The one that told me that this game was going to mean something. It led me to the shaded citadel, into something deeper and equally unforgiving. The shaded citadel is the part that I remember the most, the part I like the least. Its dark, broken passages made it impossible to rely on memory. I'd pass a room and forget it seconds later. My mental map was useless. The creatures were unpredictable. Sometimes they didn't show up at all. Even dying didn't help. Nothing stayed long enough to be learned. Darkness was one of its most effective enemies. Not just because it's terrifying, but because it made everything else feel like a choice. Choices were everywhere. Some smart, some foolish. Some you won't even realize you've made until it's too late. I could have bought a lantern from a scavenger, or avoided the citadel entirely. Instead, I leaned in, got so close to my monitor I could inhale the pixels. I watched movement. I pinged the map like sonar, nervously moving forward. And then I found the lantern mice. Small, glowy things skittering through the dark. And I took one. Rainwild doesn't explain this, but when I carried it, I felt it struggle. I moved slower. When it got hurt, the light dimmed. When it died, it went out completely. I felt awful when I dropped one. Rainwild is full of puzzles like this. Not ones you solve, but ones you survive. And when I did, it didn't feel like the game gave me an answer. It felt like I'd uncovered a secret. The lantern mouse wasn't a solution. Not really. Because once I learned how to see, I still had to eat. There were no hints. Just a handful of blue seeds that counted as food in water. A cockroach on the wall, if you were lucky. That's it. I wasn't solving puzzles anymore. I was surviving. Hungry. Frustrated. Even more lost than before. My lantern mouse was stolen by a shadow creature I could barely see. Without it, I was blind. Seconds later, I died beside the body of the only thing keeping me alive. And I had kidnapped it. And that's why I loved it. Because no one else will fail like that. And to me, that felt personal. Everyone has their own moments like this. After hours of struggling in the dark, I finally reached an opening. The shaded citadel was behind me. For now. Outside was brighter, but not safer. Ahead, a broken, crumbling bridge. Rainwild never tells you how to feel. But as I stepped onto that bridge, the music did. Not directly, just enough to let something rise. A quiet awe, like the world paused long enough for me to feel it. These moments only happen once, and then they're gone, replaced by the hum of distant machinery and wind. And that's what made it stick. Even the music behaves like everything else. Fleeting, fragile. Because Rainwild is never truly silent. You just stop noticing it, until something pierces through. The bridge faded behind me. The citadel was gone, but the danger didn't vanish. It just changed shape. Now it wasn't hidden in the dark. It was wide open. The game forced me to swim. Not because I hadn't seen water before, but because now I couldn't avoid it. Like everything else, it wasn't explained. Slugcat could swim, just barely. Pressing the button made me move faster, but panic drained my air. I drowned. Again and again. At first I thought it was random, but eventually I learned. Struggle made it worse. Letting go kept me alive. Shoreline was vast, exposed, unfamiliar. Above ground I was prey to vultures, masked creatures that plucked you from the earth like a worm in a storm. Below, it wasn't any safer. Waterlogged pipes, crushing currents, a leviathan waited. I tried to pass, but Slugcat didn't stand a chance. I'd nearly drowned just getting here, and now I had to go back. The longest stretch of water I'd faced so far. I waited, sat in silence, my orange ghost still flickering ahead, watching. I tried again, and this time it was gone. The path to the moon was open. It took me a long time to reach her. A massive, flooded chamber, full of ledges and half-sunken puzzles. Paths that looked like progress, but looped back in on themselves. I could see the exit, I just couldn't reach it. And so I climbed. I backtracked, fell, until finally I made it. At first, I wasn't even sure what I had found. She was there, half buried, surrounded by debris. When I got close to her orbs, she panicked. I didn't understand what I had done, and she didn't have the strength to explain. This is one of Rainworld's biggest story moments, and the game just treats it like an afterthought, just a fragile memory, fading away. It made me stop, because suddenly the world felt older, sadder, bigger than I had planned for. The rain was coming. I didn't know how to help her, so I left. Rainworld doesn't celebrate progress. It doesn't mark the end of a chapter. You just keep going, a little more confused than you were before. The game gave me another memory, a glimpse of her, and those small, flickering machines. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew it mattered. I followed the Overseer, more lost than I'd ever been, back through into the shaded citadel. This time I needed to go down, not by mistake, on purpose. Deeper than I'd ever been, deeper than I wanted to go, guided by something I didn't understand. Before I even reached the memory crypts, I hit a wall. I found a lantern, lying there in a forgotten corner, the aftermath of some inevitable scrap between prey and scavenger. There were no bodies, just a trace. What came next would have been impossible without light. Flooded passages, barely visible, and the kelp. It doesn't kill you. It grabs you and waits, dragging you back to its hole while you kick and struggle, until all that's left is the dim, orange glow, waiting to guide the next lost soul. I died, over and over, on 3 screens that started to feel like a prison. I even skipped a shelter, thinking I could push further, but I was wrong. But after dragging myself through sewage and seaweed, things only got worse. I was starving. The memory crypts didn't care. You can't save unless you've eaten. This place is built to break you, and it works. It was the first time I'd asked myself, had I done something wrong? Did I take a wrong turn? Was I going backwards? In Rainworld, there is no wrong way. You just move forward, or you disappear. Darkness returns, not as fear, but as disorientation. I couldn't recall rooms, couldn't see ledges, couldn't plan. No map, no food, no shelter. Just a slow, grinding crawl through a place that didn't want me. Even the creatures didn't feel right. Uncanny, mechanical, with glowing eyes that danced in the dark. Long beaks that could reach into tunnels and rip me out in seconds. And they did. They weren't invaders. They belonged here. Relics of something ancient. I wasn't being hunted. I was in their way. Things didn't get easier when the birds were gone. Sometimes 5 of them blocked the exit. Sometimes none. And on that attempt, I made it. I was free. I died on the next screen, in a pit that I didn't see. And my shelter was right there. I could almost touch it. And then I was gone. And that's where the game broke me. Not some big, dramatic loss. It simply showed me safety and then took it away. I had to walk away for a while. I came back eventually. This time I noticed the food. A single cockroach on the wall. The only creature in the room. I ate it. and I slept. And that was the moment I knew I'd never have to go back to the memory crypts again. But the game wasn't done. The leg came next. Narrow, hostile. Even my orange overseer left me. It felt different from the other places. No tunnels, no darkness pressing in. It was something else entirely. Height, distance, exposure. It was still dim, but everything was taller and wider. A vertical climb that never quite reached the sky. These weren't playgrounds. They were made for the lizards. White ones this time. Silent. Almost invisible. I wasn't even watching when it happened, and that's what got me killed. This time as I climbed, something changed. A new piece of music crept in. Not sad or haunting, just lasting. Another memory I'd carry long after this was over. It felt like the game was telling me to keep going, and so I did. Past the lizards, past the jumps that made me squeeze my controller until it cracked. I went higher, into the underhang, where the rain returned, and the thunder rolled across the sky. Lizards, camouflaged beneath every step. Every jump had the potential to send me back to the beginning. A single slip and I was gone. As I climbed, I noticed small green sparks drifting through the air. They flickered, fizzled when they touched water. The game never explains them, and I still don't know what they are. The screen darkened again. Deep reds glowed against moss-covered stone. Lightning carved the sky. Thunder boomed through massive vertical chambers. The screen shook like the world was furious. And then, rot. Not an enemy, a presence. Hollow. Moving. A cyst-like creature. Blind but listening. Tentacles spilled from its sides. Even when it wasn't there, it was. I stayed in the pipes, but its tendrils reached where its body couldn't. I didn't know what it was or why, but I felt like it was connected to the world and the wrongness underneath. Still, I climbed. Past the green sparks, past the lizards, past the rot, and then the game gave me something. A sign. A small mark tucked beside a shelter. The only time it ever did this. One I would have missed. In Dark Souls, you look back and you feel pride. In Rainworld, you look back and feel homesick. Five Pebbles was where the answers should have been, where the pieces would finally click together. But it didn't. Instead, things opened up. The pressure eased. The storm relented. Each new area brought new questions. What new creature would be waiting in the dark? But for the first time, I wasn't dreading the answer. I was searching for it. The rain subsided, quietly. In the underhang, it had already shifted once, from pounding downpours to flickering green lightning. Now, nothing. The world didn't feel safe. Even gravity, the one thing I could trust, was removed. There was no warning, no explanation. One minute I look away and I'm drifting. The game just lets go. Movement felt like ice, like I was trapped inside a broken pinball machine. Half dead, still humming. The laws that held the world together started to bend, leaving me floating in the space between them. I stayed here longer than I needed to. Every path looked like progress. Every room looked like it mattered. So I wondered. And slowly, I began to understand. Throwing a spear changed my direction. Floating preserved momentum. Spinning helplessly was my steering. Things that confused me now were second nature, and I was enjoying it. Because for the first time in a long time, nothing was trying to kill me. But the silence didn't feel safe. It felt sacred, wrong, and quietly hostile. Exposed wiring laced the walls, and a low hum pulsed beneath it all. Steady, almost like a heartbeat. I drifted upwards, through towers of systems I couldn't comprehend, built for something that no longer existed. By now, shelter was a distant memory. The walls began to change, subtly at first, then all at once. Smooth surfaces turned sterile. Metal gave way to something organic. I floated through a space that pulsed with life, but lacked purpose. Wires curled like veins. Structures breathed. Then I struck something red. It shattered on impact, splintered like glass, only to reassemble, deliberately, piece by piece. Above, the world twisted further. Symbols flickered across the walls in a language I would never understand. I saw voids, suspended in machinery, black holes threaded through flesh, twitching with every pulse, alive, aware, and then the music. The same melody from the very first cutscene, except now it was warped. And for the first time in the entire game, I felt like Slugcat and I were hearing the same song. The room was orange, glowing. Gravity snapped back into place, like something ancient, waking after centuries of silence. It spoke, but I couldn't understand it. The same fractured symbols from before, the same voice, distorted. It didn't sound angry, it sounded broken and frustrated. It paused, and then without warning, I was flung into the air. He gave me a mark, and then I could understand him. We are stuck in a cycle, a pattern, endlessly repeating. He called himself a god. His people had a solution. A dying world, eroded and abandoned, still spinning, for no one. He couldn't help me. He couldn't help himself. He gave me something, a direction, a goal, past the farm arrays, down. I kept moving, even if I knew that I'd never make it home. Maybe I'd always known. Gravity departed, and so did I. I began my journey again, downwards this time, into what should have been my salvation. Now I had a new goal, one I didn't ask for, one I didn't need. My motivation was already fading. I wasn't surviving for a reason anymore. I was just surviving, because that's all I knew how to do. So I kept going. I descended the wall. At first, it felt easier, not because it was, but because I had changed. I slammed myself against every obstacle Rainworld could offer, and somehow I was still here. Massive vertical gaps opened beneath me. Lizards stalked the edges, waiting for a single mistake, a fall that could undo everything. The horizon opened. The world unfolded like a scar. Ahead of me, a broken skyline, split open like fruit, rotting from the inside. A city that had outlived its architects. Megastructures, stripped of purpose, automation without audience. The full extent of Rainworld's collapse, laid bare. By now I wasn't learning anymore, not like I had been before. Every jump was still a test, but I already knew the answers, or at least the ones that Rainworld was willing to give. That knowledge had been building from the beginning. Spears thrown on instinct, down to the last second. Lizards dodged on reflexes alone. None of it felt like guessing anymore. It was muscle memory, drilled in through failure, over and over again. I didn't survive by choice. I survived because the world taught me how, because it forced me to. A hollow escape from an already empty room. Rainworld wasn't trying to stop me. It was simply asking, is this still worth it? There were fewer creatures now, fewer distractions, just wind, decay, and motion. Things weren't scary anymore, just quieter, unresolved. The sheer scale of abandonment grew as I descended. I was no longer a survivor, just a helpless observer with no power to change anything. And that gave me time to think about how far I'd come and about how little remained. That homesick feeling from before, fainter now. If I turned around now, I could go back, through Five Pebbles, the underhang, the leg, memory crypts, shoreline, the shaded citadel, all of it. The game wouldn't stop me. It wouldn't even ask why. But it wouldn't be home. The farm arrays weren't dangerous. Or at least, not in the way I expected. Like the shoreline before it, the world opened. It breathed. The predators were gone. In their place, towering behemoths. At first I was terrified, but they were gentle, indifferent, barely aware that I existed. They weren't hunting, and they weren't running away either. Instead, the danger came from below, buried in soil, waiting for its next meal. If it catches you, it pulls you under, slowly. Sometimes, it's easier not to struggle. The threats weren't obvious anymore. The game never told me what to do, but I was stuck. Rainworld taught me caution, and now it demanded trust. I needed the reindeer. They appeared when they pleased, left when they didn't. I was frustrated. Progress wasn't earned, it was permitted, but only if the world allowed it. I went down into the very depths of the world. One last jump, Motivation rose through my fingers as I descended. The calm was gone, and this was chaos. I found a lantern, still flickering. Its owner lay beside it, clinging to its last breath. I was expecting silence, stillness, but the world wasn't done fighting. The lower chambers were like a battlefield. Scavengers, lizards, wormgrass, factions, fighting for a decaying world. I ran, armed myself without thinking. I wasn't wandering anymore. I moved quickly. I watched a scavenger get pulled into the ground beside me, gone without a trace. And in that moment I escaped, into the filtration system, into the pipes of the world, trapped between lizards I could barely see and drops I couldn't survive. I moved on, pushed forward by fear. Somehow, I was still alive. And then, a shift. The air lifted, and the world shimmered. Gravity disappeared, and then a pool of golden light. It felt like a trick, like the game was taunting me. But Rainworld was asking something of me. It wanted trust. One final test, to see if I had learned how to listen. It didn't feel like I was anywhere. It didn't feel like I was leaving. These were my final moments. Confusion, mixed with curiosity. I didn't resist. It was time to go. Right at the start, we're shown that Slugcat was a baby when he was separated from his family. By the time we take control, he's older. Too much older. It never made any sense. I still tried to understand it, even as the rest of the world collapsed around me. I was given a way out, and I took it. But the story kept going. A decaying, dying world. Meaningless. Its inhabitants clinging onto their last moments, breathing final, fading breaths. I still don't know what happened. Slugcat was never going home, even from the beginning. He wasn't on a rescue mission or a return. He was just surviving. That's all he ever had. Rainworld broke me from the very beginning. I just didn't know it yet.